Hi, and welcome to Product Builder. I'm Eyal, and this time I'm happy to talk again with Nicole Priel, co-founder of Kinetic Capital and the spark behind Israel's B2C Believers community. We talk mostly about B2C and why, according to Nicole, this is the best bet to take these days. Enjoy! Hey Nicole, welcome back. How are you?
Doing great. How are you?
I'm good. So, we actually tried to record this just before, and we had a technical problem. So, welcome back. You've been here to episode 8. We'll put a link in the description. In the meantime, please tell us again what you've been up to since you last been here.
Yeah, so it was such an honor to be one of your first guests and great to be back. In the time that's transpired, there's been a couple wars, but also some really great investments that have been made and continuing to work with early stage companies. And as of most recently, building my own fund.
Yes, tell us more about it.
Sure. So the focus is a global consumer fund based here in Tel Aviv. So my partner and I have a very, very strong thesis on the future of consumer. We think that the sector has been overlooked just as the sector is coming to an inflection point in terms of the potential for the next generation of consumer businesses to be built today on the back of recent shifts and advancements in AI. So we plan to be there for it.
That's good. And the idea behind before that, the name of the fund is?
Kinetic Capital.
Yeah, that's a nice name. And Amir is your partner, right? And what's his background, just to make sure that the power team understand everything?
Yeah, so Amir is the real MVP in this duo. He's an operator. He comes from the gaming industry. He's worked at 3 different gaming unicorns in his career, leading marketing teams. Most recently, he was at Wildlife Studios, which is a Brazilian gaming company, last valued at $3 billion, I think. And he was the CMO, where he managed about 300 people and marketing budgets of $250 million. So he is an expert in all things user acquisition and monetization and digital platforms. He's really, really special. And he spent the last couple of years advising and investing as an angel in consumer businesses.
That's great. It sounds good. So I just want to ask you this. I have many questions, but you mentioned the wars and the war between with the war and many wars. So, the natural thing to do here in Israel is probably to go to defense tech, to, emerging markets like that. But you went ahead and focused on, the B2C, the most Israeli thing, I guess, like a decade ago. Can you tell us more about it?
Yeah.
Why have you chosen that?
Absolutely. So no hate for anyone else. There's enough love for all industries, but B2C seems like a screaming opportunity, like a diamond in the rough that people are overlooking. And it seems just totally crazy to me that there's an opportunity that big that's simply overlooked. So the way we think about it is that there's basically 3 pillars that are supporting this thesis. One is that consumers squarely a venture play. So there's low capital requirements for consumer businesses. They're highly scalable and there's fast time to money, right? So you can put a product out there and within weeks you can have paying customers. It's very different from certain other areas that have seen investments in recent years. At the same time, some of the biggest venture-backed outcomes have been consumer businesses. Going back, if you think about the mobile generation, gave us Waze and Candy Crush and DoorDash and Instagram. And then the revolution before that, the internet revolution, gave us Google and a whole host of other businesses that are just ubiquitous today. Today, we're on the cusp of the third generation of the third technological shift of the last 30 years. So
you're focusing in B2C in Israel, and in the era of AI, how many founders you actually meet? How many investable founders are actually out there, according to what you see?
Yeah. So part of Israel being a consumer powerhouse is that there's a lot of talent in these companies that we just mentioned who are embarking on their own journeys, taking with them the knowledge from these consumer businesses and taking them out and building new companies. So we're seeing a lot of budding entrepreneurs taking that step. And up until now, hasn't really been a lot of resources, capital or otherwise, to support them on this journey, which is one of the biggest opportunities of our lifetimes, is the way we see it.
Yeah, and that's another thing, I guess, right? You see out there, I don't know about B2C, but you see out there more and more founders, right? Due to the fact that everything is now, like the how is quite easy, right? So in what shape do you find those founders that you meet? Like the level of readiness,
Yeah, varying degrees. I think previously what maybe held people back from starting startups in the traditional sense was, wow, I've got to recruit a whole team and I need a ton of capital, and where am I going to find the best engineers? That's changed so much recently, where people can now, with great confidence, go out and kind of start to build and tinker with things on their own, let them catch wind and go from there. So the resources required are much lower, which is reducing the barriers to entry for folks. And they're coming at various stages. Some of them are, still just with a deck. Others have prototypes, and others have, their first 1,000 paying customers and growing quickly. Some have raised minimal amounts of capital, and others are waiting until they reach genuine levels of traction before they go out to the market to raise. So it's a little bit of everything.
So that's interesting as well. Basically, the idea right now, as I see it, is the quickness that you need to be in, right? It's not like it's been to like a year ago or even 2 years ago, and me as a product, as a founder, whatever. Like the phase of discovery, for example, of understanding if there's legibility for my business is quite shortened, right? According to how it used to be. So do you even look on people with presentation, or just wireframes,
Yeah, I mean, it's legitimate. It's legitimate. We love to engage with founders at any scale. So sometimes they're often still in ideation or working at their companies, and they're thinking about entrepreneurship. So it's never too early to talk to early stage investors like ourselves. Nowadays, there is somewhat of a higher expectation that, hey, come with some data. We want to do some degree of cohort analysis. So you're in a very different position from a fundraising perspective if you have 6 months worth of data versus none at all. And nowadays, it's especially in consumer, where you can spin up campaigns and validate very, very quickly and even build products quicker than ever before. The expectation is that you can get there in a reasonable time frame.
Plus, it's all, again, as a founder, I guess, if I would need to think about my ROI to start planning for, investment and working on that versus building my product quickly as I can, I would probably choose the latter, right? So I also ask that because there's a different level of service that you need to provide to those different needs, right? So what your focus is right now? Like, where do you think you and Amir can shine better in those segments?
Yeah, so we're really hands-on investors, and we have been our whole careers. So we're used to partnering with founders from really inception, from the earliest stages, and helping them with everything from finding their first office to hiring their first employees to registering a US company and so on and so forth. So we get involved in all those aspects, and Amir's a marketing whiz. So he's super hands-on with everything user acquisition. We love getting involved with marketing and branding, first hires, and so on. So it really spans the whole gamut.
רגע לפני שממשיכים, לחצו על הקישור לקבוצת הוואטסאפ של פרודקט בילדר בתיאור הפרק, והצטרפו לקהילה. שם תוכלו להמשיך את הדיון, לשאול שאלות ולהיות הראשונים שמקבלים עדכונים על פרקי תכלס חדשים. מחכים לכם שם. ועכשיו, חזרה לפרק.
Tell me a bit more about the B2C Believers cult that you created. I'm going to call it a cult, but tell me about this notion.
Yeah, so I think it was last summer. So 12 months ago, I realized that about something like 70% of my deal flow was coming from cyber and AI, or AI and cyber, and it got me a little bit worried for the future of our tiny ecosystem here. I said, it's all good and well to have $300 million exits. No one's going to complain about that. But our entire economy rests on the high-tech industry. It's dependent on the high-tech industry. And it's not enough for the high-tech industry to be dependent on one sector, which is cyber. It's just putting our eggs into too many baskets. And we're putting our reputation as Startup Nation on the line if that's all we really have going for us. And we need to remain competitive to Silicon Valley and other ecosystems. And at the time, I was doing an investment in a consumer business called Aria. And I started wondering to myself, why haven't I seen more consumer businesses? Why is it just a tiny percentage of the overall companies that I see in any given month? My first response was, well, okay, let's do an ideation workshop. Let's bring together some folks, put them in a room, and think about how entrepreneurs who are thinking about consumer can really nail down an idea. And things just kind of took course from there, and we ended up saying, okay, let's just build a community, because there's so much missing. There's so much infrastructure that's available today in our B2B worlds. So if you're coming out of one of these special units or certain companies, it's a very clear path about how you make initial connections with angel investors and meet funds and open doors to C-levels. That doesn't really exist today for B2C founders. And that's what we ultimately set out to change. And it all culminated with our first event in March of this year. It was our inaugural event. I reached out to some of the leading consumer CEOs and founders in Israel. I told them about the initiative, and they all signed up and said, sure, I'm in, whatever we can do to help. So in this very building, I had booked the loft. I thought maybe 30 or 40 people would show up for such an event, because again, who talks about B2C in Israel? I posted it only on my LinkedIn and went to sleep. And within 24 hours, I had 200 registrants, and we were overbooked, and we had to move to a larger venue to accommodate the crowd. And it ended up being a tremendously successful event, and we got really great feedback. And now we're planning our next event's coming up in a couple of weeks, and we have one on the docket for the fall as well. So we're really seeing our vision come to life, and hoping to be the home for the B2C community in Israel, but also globally.
Yeah, I love it. I actually wanted to ask about, do you see the same notion in the US, in Europe as well? Europe is usually known for their B2C products, right? Spotify, etc.
Yeah, lovable as of lately as well. It's a really great question. And part of the confluence of events, the way that we look at it is that all the stars have aligned for consumer investing to take off over the next decade. Part of it is, if you look at the data, a decade ago, a third of all venture dollars in the US went to consumer companies. Today, that figure is about 5 or 6%. So just as we're at the turning point for investments into this sector, investments are at an all-time low. But that's the market dislocation that we love to see that founders bring to us. And that's the market dislocation that we're going to capitalize on now with Kinetic Capital, saying the opportunity is so vast, it's ahead of us, but no one's looking at it. So the same trends that we've seen in Israel are parallel to what we're seeing in the rest of the world as well.
What do you think, I can think of several reasons, but what do you think besides marketing was the reason for that, for this change that happened this decade?
There's a couple of theories. One is that the last technological revolution of the mobile revolution spawned many, many, many consumer businesses. So a lot of capital went into those sorts of businesses. Once that fanfare died down, capital naturally shifted to other areas. Another theory is that there's been a lot of capital flowing into SaaS, enterprise SaaS. The past decade was the decade of the Workdays of the world. And lastly, I think a lot of investors got burned investing in consumer businesses that were dressed up as tech companies, but weren't really tech companies. So if you think about Blue Apron and Rent the Runway, some of these companies are public today. You can see how their market caps have just collapsed. So I think that's kept investors on the sidelines for a while. But like most markets, these are cyclical opportunities, and now seems to be really the best time to come back in. And I think we take a very, very long-term view. We think that there's always powerful consumer businesses to be built. But now, for the first time in a very long time, the opportunity is staring us right in the face.
So I do want to ask about industries that you find interesting. We'll touch that in a sec, but do you think it's also related to like what you mentioned about SaaS, to the pandemic and people working from home? Like during pandemic, all I needed is Amazon, probably, and maybe Walt, but that's pretty much it, right?
That's true. But then in what sense would that, do you think that adversely, like negatively impacted investments into consumer?
I think A, yes, but B, I think that, companies that I worked with, enterprise companies, started to work from home. Those people needed like digital solutions for many things. They needed security for those solutions. And I think there was plenty of money in the market. And that's another reason for, SaaS to be as big as it is right now. I don't know, assumption.
True. Funny enough, Zoom started out as a consumer-facing business, as did Wix and Monday in many respects. So when we talk about consumer, it's such a vast category. It can be cyber like Guardio. It could be marketplaces like Fiverr. It can be InsurTech like Lemonade. So it touches on many different parts of our everyday lives. It's hard to think back to the pandemic because honestly, that feels like it was a lifetime ago. The markets have changed in so many ways since then. Technology's changed in so many ways. I think that by and large, the effects of COVID have largely kind of moved through the market.
Yeah, I'm just looking, I'm following the money,
Yeah.
So tell us, like, what kind of industries in B2C do you spot as, the big winners or the big focus areas for you or for founders?
I think that standing where we are today, we don't even know who the iconic companies of the next decade are going to be because they're being built right now. But I can just share with you some of the trends that we're observing that I find quite interesting.
Please.
One is this, the sector of short form drama app. Yeah.
Short form drama.
Yeah. So it's been taking off in the East, in Asia. These mini series of 60 seconds or 3 minutes each have been growing like wildfire. And now content, very, very low costs. And there are startups emerging in the space to answer that demand in the West.
What do you think about dating, psychology, all the human interaction apps? What do you think about education?
Wow. Super interesting that you mentioned that because one of the other trends that we've observed lately is tech having the ability to take down barriers in what were once taboo subjects and making them mainstream. Probably the best example is online dating. So I remember when JDate and I guess it was OkCupid and ChristianSingles.com were all launched as .com websites. People used them, but they were embarrassed to admit that they actually did until Tinder came along and made it cool and made it swipeable and made it something that the young generation could get into. And now it's perfectly acceptable to meet your spouse on an app. And we've seen that carry on into other areas of relationships and wellness. So if you look at Hims or Flow Health, which are multi-billion-dollar companies in the US tackling subjects such as hair loss and erectile dysfunction and female menstruation, these are subjects that no one really wanted to talk about, but now they've become mainstream. And my investment in Aria is similar.
I actually heard a conversation with the CPO of Duolingo, and he said that they are observing getting into dating because they know pretty much a lot about the users and matching, etc. So that's interesting. I'm going to ask you also about like business models, right? So in B2C, in consumer apps, usually, there's the subscription model that usually is hard to pull off. Like, for example, Duolingo that we just mentioned, like they struggle with for over a decade, as far as I understand. What do you think about that? Do you think that the monetization is going to remain the same? Is going to be different? What do you project at?
So it's a really great question. And I look at the gaming industry for inspiration there. Because Duolingo, like other companies, if you think about Headspace and so on, they've incorporated so many best practices from the gaming industry to tackle exactly that. So this whole idea of streaks that people are obsessed with in Duolingo comes from the gaming industry. And the spin wheel where you can win a prize in some e-commerce shops today, that also comes from the gaming industry. In-app purchases and in-app advertising are all different elements and mechanisms that we're seeing spread from gaming into other areas within consumer businesses. So yeah, subscription is one model. It makes sense for a personal finance app, for instance. Maybe makes sense for certain AI coaches and things like that. For others, it could be on demand. The models definitely vary based on the business need and what makes sense for the user. I recently met a company that was trying to facilitate in some way secondhand car purchases. That's something that you can't charge a subscription for, right? That's a purchase that a customer makes once every few years at best. So it's an entirely different model. It opens up a lot of questions about what are the best monetization and pricing tactics for different businesses.
I want to say that I'm interviewing here quite a lot of gaming, founders, product people, etc. And now they look back on Duolingo and they actually copycat them. But I do want to say that I think that in the era of many products, of AI that generates great products, maybe great disposable products, I do, and we can touch that as well if you'd like, but I do think that the pricing models are going to be different, the business model. I do think that maybe one day it will work as a success, success metrics. Like if you actually help me, if I'm learning with Duolingo and I'm learning for X days and I haven't learned too much and I cannot talk to anyone, but I'll use app X and it helped me to talk Portuguese fluently. I think it's going to go there. That's what I think.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like if you help me score above a 1500 on my SATs, I'll pay you this. There's similar pricing buckets in enterprise, right? Like tiered pricing based on usage or seats or the value that can be derived from the product. So it could make sense, but that poses its own challenges about visibility into the business and how sticky the revenue is and what the margins are accordingly. So if you have a product, obviously, with very infrequent usage, your CAC needs to be in line with that. And that's the challenge.
Exactly. This is the enigma that I'm working with. When I've got free time, I'm not sure how this is going to work, to be honest. I don't think that subscriptions will remain as they are right now, because also in the real world that's not happening. Like if you don't like a service, you're just going to negotiate about it, you're going to talk to anyone. But anyways, that's what I think. Tell me, what do you think about marketing? Let's touch base on that.
One of my favorite topics.
Yes. I do understand it's a big challenge. If we'll talk, for example, about Base 44, right? So this guy Mao killed it, right? I don't know if he even spent one marketing dollar, but in Israel he went bananas, right? But this is so hard to pull off if you're not the first one to enter a specific niche, a specific market, right? And it's going to be harder. So how do you, as an investor, actually, what are the indicators that leads you when you see a specific investment opportunity? How do you approach marketing?
Tale as old as time, competition. I actually am of the belief that you don't need to be the first to the market.
Really?
In fact, I think it can be detrimental to be first to market.
But what does it says in terms of marketing, right? Because if you're not the first, then there are 50,000 like you, and then it gets tricky, right? And expensive.
I accept that point. The other side of the argument is that the early entrants can invest in educating the market for you, and then you come in and swoop up the folks who have already been educated, and you come in at a different point in the hype cycle. I like to point out the example of cloud security in this instance, because I think the first EC2, what was it I think it was the first S3 bucket. I might be wrong on that AWS put out was in 2006. I could be wrong. but it was something around that. The cloud was in its infancy back then. You had generations of cloud security companies that emerged as early as like 2010, were some of like the leading cloud security companies. But if you looked forward, 15 years ahead, there were multiple generations and multiple successes of cloud security companies, which culminated most recently in Google's acquisition of Wiz for $32 billion. So in 2020, I myself invested in a cloud security company, and a lot of people passed on the space and passed on the company because they said, why do you need to do that? There's already established players in the market. What's changed? There are constant iterations in technology and workflows and user behavior that demand different products at different points in time. So most of the value that was actually created in cloud security came almost 2 decades after the cloud was kind of invented. So how does it impact marketing? I think you have to be realistic with yourself about who's your ICP and what's really your secret sauce in distribution and go to market. Because if you're content heavy and you're relying on content to drive your business, that can take a long time, right? SEO requires quite a bit of time and investment. Whereas if you're going into performance marketing, the costs initially upfront might be higher, but the payoff can be quicker. I think it's important to test, obviously, different methods and lean into what works as a general rule.
Probably the first thing that, I guess that's me, but probably you as well, would be looking in a founder, right? Strong marketing instinct and experience. And maybe start from there, by the way, before you actually build anything. What else do you look for in such a founder?
So yeah, commercial acumen is definitely up there. I think everyone has repeated this so many times that, tech and product does not equal successful startup. And it's true. It's about having that awareness about the market. And basically, can you sell? Can you put this product into the hands of customers? That's largely the driving force and what determines the ultimate success. So we definitely do look for that. We look for hustle and grit and a lot of curiosity and this relentless need to figure out problems and solve them and be customer first.
Probably move quicker than ever before. I don't know. But also, if we touch back on base 44, for example, what I liked about this story is that, like, you need to understand where technology is going, but not like 2 years from now, but in a limited time, like a few months from now, and then you need to ride that wave. And if you miss that, then like someone else will catch you up. So I think like a good understanding of like where AI is going to, what's the next model is going to include, that's like that. That's something that I would expect from a founder that comes to me. That's a big win, right?
Yeah, but no one knows what's peak technology today is different than what it'll be in 2 weeks from now. So I don't think you can put too many eggs in one basket and assume that that's going to be the be all end all. You have to be extremely iterative and on your toes all the time now more than ever. So that means don't over optimize on anything really, because you have to be extremely nimble. I think just on the note of base 44, you want to know something interesting that I was talking about with someone over lunch today. When it comes to base 44, is that we remarked the outcome, the $80 million acquisition, was basically it's equivalent to $1 billion acquisition for the founder. $1 billion acquisition.
That's 100%, of course.
Yeah. $1 billion acquisition today usually means that the founder has been diluted to 10% maybe, and probably a decade of long, hard slog. So an $80 million exit as a solo entrepreneur within a short time frame is the equivalent of a $1 billion acquisition in more traditional venture sense.
For sure, that's amazing. Also, if we'll touch back again on the marketing aspect, that's a big challenge that probably he didn't want to face. And so selling was a good exit point as well, like in that term as well, I think.
Yeah, he totally nailed founder-led marketing, which so many people talk to me about today because they've woken up perhaps a little bit late about the power of using social media to help drive your business, not only on the customer side, but also on the employee side. And it can be an extremely, extremely powerful tool. And when used right, with a CAC of 0.
I also want to ask you, how do you actually prioritize your investments between all that, different industries that we talked about, all those opportunities? Like, what you're actually looking for when you see a company?
Yeah. So we have our areas of interest and theses, but we never want that to get in the way of making a good investment. So I really love when a founder comes with an idea that I haven't thought of even and shows me a market dislocation or an opportunity that's a screaming buy, why no one's doing it and they're going to do it better, or people are doing it and they're going to do it better. So I like to come in completely open-minded without any preconceived notions or biases and just hear about why someone is excited about an opportunity and why they're going to be the ones to crush it. So if they can get me excited, that's all I need to get on board. And I will put, my blood, sweat, and tears into making that happen alongside them because I bought in from day one. I've always discussed with fellow investors that if you need to diligence your way to a yes to make an investment decision, it's probably not a good investment decision. And that doesn't mean invest from your gut. It means having just like a very good sense for people and sense for opportunities. Many factors need to come together to culminate in getting to that yes. But usually, like in any kind of relationship, quite early on if it's going to be a match and then lean into that. But if you're struggling to get to that point where you're saying yes, it makes it a little bit more difficult.
Being humans. So if a founder wants to connect with you, what would be the best way?
I'm on LinkedIn as Nicole Priel, and my email address is in my profile, but it's also simple, nicole@kineticcapital.vc. And my phone number is, just kidding.
And also regarding the community that you founded, if people want to join in, is there still space? Is it possible?
Yeah, absolutely. The more the merrier. Ping me.
You can put a link actually if you'd like to.
Perfect. Yeah. The B2C Believers, we're having our next event in a couple of weeks in July. We'd love to have anyone and everyone there.
I'm really happy that you managed to find the time to come back to the podcast. And I hope that next year when you'll be here, you have plenty of interesting case studies to share with us. So what do you wish for yourself in a year?
Wow. A year from now, I would love to be sitting with you here in this room recording a podcast, talking about all of our incredible investments and how different the world is then than it is today. Because if the world's different, we've made progress. And at the rate at which things are changing today, I'm pretty optimistic that that's going to be the case.
Me too. Okay, Nicole, thank you so much. It was a pleasure.
Thanks, Eyal.
Thanks. Bye, guys. Bye.
היי חברים, תודה על ההקשבה. אם מצאתם את הפודקאסט הזה בעל ערך, תוכלו להירשם, לעקוב אחרינו, כמובן לפרקים נוספים בספוטיפיי, אפל פודקאסט או כל אפליקציה אחרת. כמובן שאם לא מצאתם אותנו באיזושהי אפליקציה, אשמח שתכתבו לנו. נשמח מאוד ל5 כוכבים בכל פלטפורמה ושתעקבו אחרינו כדי שעוד מאזינים יוכלו להיחשף אלינו ולמצוא את הפודקאסט. אתם גם יכולים למצוא את הפרקים הקודמים בכל אפליקציה או בערוץ היוטיוב, יש לנו לינקים בתיאור. אז עד הפעם הבאה, יאללה, תהיו יעילים וביי ביי.